Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Bite Size Steelers. I am your host, Simon Short, here to give you a very brief reaction to the Steelers Week 1 loss to the San Francisco 49ers last Sunday, 30-7, and most importantly, preview the upcoming matchup on Monday night at Acrisure Stadium, where the Pittsburgh Steelers will be taking on division rival Cleveland Browns. So I had recorded a reaction episode to the Steelers' loss to the 49ers, and there's so many good podcasts, so many good articles you could go and download the content from to dive into all of the specifics on what went wrong for Pittsburgh, what things looked bad, what things looked worse. And I just figured, man, what I am here to do is really give you the nuts and bolts, try to break everything down as succinctly as possible. And the best I could come up with was a 10-minute episode on that week 1 loss to the 49ers, because it all started really right at the beginning and very quickly went off the rails. And the Steelers just did not have the experience, I think, from an offensive standpoint, the talent, I would say, from an offensive standpoint, or the game plan from an offensive standpoint to do what they needed to do to come back in that game after it started off so poorly. And defensively, listen, when the defense is on the field as much as it was, getting put in bad situations over and over again, and the score is as high as it already was against them, it's hard to really judge anything that you're doing. You're mixing things up. You're coming off of your game plan so quickly when you're already down 3 scores in the first quarter. But here's what I saw from game 1 after watching it and watching it back. The first thing, and really what I think this all boils down to, is what is this offense? We said in the preview, and people a lot smarter than me have been saying all offseason, all preseason, that the Pittsburgh Steelers want to be what we expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to be. They have not yet moved into this new age, 2020s pass first offense. This is a run first offense. You have a first round pick at running back. You have a first round pick at offensive tackle who is not playing yet, which is fine. You have a mid round pick devoted to a blocking tight end. Your big money free agent of the offseason is a guard in Isaac Seumalo. This team needs to be running the ball first. Kenny Pickett is a quarterback who I think I said this in the preview of this show, is good and can be an above average quarterback. But you didn't draft Kenny Pickett thinking he could be a top 5, top 8 quarterback. At least I don't think. And quarterback a high powered offense that can drop back, spread them out, and beat teams through the air. The Pittsburgh Steelers are built to be successful by running the football first on offense and then making smart passes that take advantage of now the defense focusing on the run and taking the occasional deep shot downfield. Look at what the Detroit Lions did against the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday night, the season opener of the NFL season. Run the ball, play action, slant, play action, dig, play action, comeback. And then every once in a while, you take the deep shot, you hope that the receivers create some yak opportunities, and that's your offense. And that could be a very good offense. That the Lions had a top 5 offense in the NFL last season that way. That was my expectation for the Steelers this season. Again, in the season preview, I said top 15. I hope, maybe the high ceiling is like the 12th best offense in the league. But this team is not going to do that by putting it all on Kenny Pickett's shoulders and going through the air. So just to highlight that, 5 of the first 6 plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers were pass attempts. The first 3 plays of the game were pass attempts. In that you get a sack and you get an interception against 49ers defense that we had talked about in the game preview episode was banged up, but for the most part had everybody played. And, Charvarius Ward was obviously one of those guys that we talked about from the injury report. He played, he had the interception. And then it all just kind of went wrong from there. So knowing the identity is going to be really key for Pittsburgh. I will be very surprised. We'll talk about the Browns game here in a minute, but I will be very surprised if the first play is not a running play. This team has to attack, has to get their offensive line going, has to get their confidence up, has to get everybody's juices flowing, has to get Kenny Pickett into advantageous situations by running the football. Now to Kenny Pickett. I didn't like the play calling. I didn't like the offensive concepts. You can see a lot of great breakdowns on that elsewhere, but Kenny did not play well. There's no sugarcoating it. The sky isn't falling. This isn't a bench Kenny Pickett. We have to draft a quarterback in round 1 of the draft next season. Not yet, anyways. But it was not a good showing. He was frazzled. He was getting back to what was my pet peeve of him coming out of college, where he was relying on his legs in a way that makes you think that he is a scrambling, true extend the play quarterback. And he can do that stuff to an extent, but that's not his game. So, or that's, sorry, not that is his game, but it's not the thing that's going to make this offense, again, an elite offense. Primarily what I'm looking for from Kenny Pickett is control in the pocket. A lot of times he was fading back deep into the pocket. He was drifting back into the left or back into the right. And that's what got him in trouble with sacks and interceptions last year. And it did the same again here in this game. So he did not play well. He has to have poise in the pocket. He has to read through his progressions, which he was reading through them fine, but not reading them accurately. He missed a lot of throws. He came back to some throws that he already passed up, and by then it was too late. Kenny Pickett just needs to play under control and on time because he has the talent to be good. And I think what will help with that is establishing a ground game first. So Kenny Pickett did not have a good game in week 1 for sure. On defense, it's really hard to assess who played well and who didn't because the team got so put out of their game plan so early on. Cam Hayward obviously gets hurt during the game. We'll talk about him in a couple minutes. But a couple notes from defense. Patrick Peterson had his highs and lows. He gave up the 2 touchdowns to Brandon Ayuk. He got beat. But he also had some plays where he had some great pass breakups and he got his hands on some balls that he thought he could have intercepted. That's going to be the life with a good, albeit older cornerback. He's going to have his highs and lows. We saw this with Joe Hayden a couple seasons ago in his last year in Pittsburgh. You're going to have moments where his brain and his IQ and his toughness and his talent are going to create some good plays, but that declining athleticism is going to get him beat a few times. So Patrick Peterson has his highs and lows. We'll see how that continues to go through the season. And then from the linebacker position, there was a lot of Landon Roberts early in this game. Now, he played pretty well, and he played well for who he is, but there was a lot of Landon Roberts in coverage, a lot of Landon Roberts going side to side, which is not what you want him to do. You want him being the Vince Williams thumper, go downfield, go downhill, and make plays. And when he was doing that, it was going well. And then when you ask him to cover George Kittle on a 4th and 1 with a release from motion, that's not gonna go well. And it was just downhill from there. The linebacking core, we talked about it in the season preview show, all new. We like the talent. We think it could be better than it was last season. But when you constantly have the turnover for a whole position group that the Steelers continue to have, there's going to be communication errors, and there's just going to be this grace period of them getting up to game speed in the system, really learning everything about the other members of the team, because the Steelers still ask a lot of their linebackers, something that not every team does anymore. If we're going to see the Pittsburgh Steelers continue to do that, ask a lot of their linebackers every single year, very soon, and I've been advocating for this for a couple of seasons now, we need to see a real investment in the position. Either a guy coming off his rookie deal, who is a very good player, who the Steelers need to throw a lot of money at. I wanted them to trade for Roquan Smith last year. We saw what he did for Baltimore, or a first-round pick to a really blue chip style linebacker. So be prepared for this linebacker room to have some struggles here the rest of the early part of the season. They'll be very key against the Browns on Monday night, but hopefully by the middle of the season, this team is operating very well. And then lastly, on the defensive side and from week 1, how does this nickel corner position continue to play out? Minkah played a lot of snaps there in week 1 and to get 3 safety looks, but it didn't operate the way I expected going into week 1. Chandon Sullivan only got 19% of the defensive snaps in this one. Elijah Riley got 0. We thought there might be some Elijah Riley on rundowns, Sullivan on pass downs. We thought maybe we'd see Peterson in the slot, Joey Porter in nickel. Joey Porter only played in dime. He played very few snaps in this one defensively. Patrick Peterson was on the outside, I think, every snap or just about. Obviously, Desmond King was inactive for this game. And Minkah Fitzpatrick was moved around a lot. These numbers are from PFF. Minkah was logged as a free safety for 28 snaps. And then he was logged as in the box or in the slot for 26 snaps combined. And then they have corner designated as 8 snaps. I don't know if that's technically as an outside corner or just really kind of technically the nickel and just further away from the line of scrimmage. If there's 2 receivers out wide on one side for San Francisco, I don't know how they necessarily tag that. And then defensive line 6, so just up still in the box near the line of scrimmage. He did cover George Kittle a lot in this game, so those are probably a handful of those snaps as well. We've seen the Steelers move Minka around in the past. It's happened in week 1, especially the Bills game 2 years ago. They played him in nickel a good bit. That was the first year without Mike Hilton, so they were trying to figure out that position and see what was going to happen. And without Cameron Sutton this year, same thing. They don't have a true defined idea yet in place. Now, maybe Desmond King is that, and they just need another week or 2 to get him up to speed. And even though Minka can do this, this is why he left Miami, right? That's why he was upset. He wanted a trade. I think there's a little more purpose behind Pittsburgh doing it. I think there's a little bit more of a game plan. Minka said that when he was in Miami, it was like week to week. He didn't know what he was going to be playing. I think if Minka for Pittsburgh is, hey, every week he's playing primarily free safety, but he knows that the plan for certain matchups is to do different things, I think that's okay. But this isn't what I want to see, both from for Minka standpoint, but also from a play standpoint. Minka and the Steelers are just better when he's playing free safety. He's getting to play robber every once in a while. He's getting to disguise what he's doing, but he's back there making plays. And I hope to see more of that here in week 2. So with that, let's get into the game 2 preview. Let's first start with the injuries and the injury report. So obviously the big one for the Pittsburgh Steelers is Cameron Hayward is on IR for a groin injury that he had surgery to repair this week. He's going to be out for a while. He's going to be out till at least after the bye week. It probably will be more like around Thanksgiving. So we're looking at a very similar situation to TJ Watt being out last season. I said there was no excuses for this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. They need to be an elite group this year. Everyone was healthy, no excuses. Just sorry, Steelers Nation, if I jinx that. But Cameron Hayward is out. So this defensive line is going to have a lot of questions, a lot of things that need to be answered. Replacing Cam Hayward on the 53-man roster is wide receiver Des Fitzpatrick, who was on the team in training camp. He was out there in preseason. He did his best work on special teams, but he's a guy that is an outside receiver. He could take some offensive snaps and be active for the offense because Deontay Johnson is also out for a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. Johnson is not on IR. The injury initially was unclear how long it would be, a couple of weeks, and then it looked like maybe 4 weeks, so maybe he could go to IR. He's not on IR, so I'm thinking this could be somewhere in the he misses 2 games standpoint, maybe 3 games, but he definitely will not be on the field week 2 against the Cleveland Browns. So we'll see if Des Fitzpatrick gets a hat or if Gunnar Olszewski gets a hat, who is the inactive wide receiver in week 1 against San Francisco, or if they both manage to get onto the field. Fitzpatrick didn't really make a whole lot of plays in the preseason. On offense, this team likes what Gunnar provides as a slot receiver, blocker, jet sweep guy, but Fitzpatrick definitely was the better special teams player. A guy that seemed hobbled coming out of the game and going into the game was Miles Boykin, who's the team's 5th wide receiver. He's a core special teamer, but he isn't on the injury report, so it seems like he's good to go, but Dez might provide a little bit of insurance if Boykin suffers an injury in game. So we'll see what they do there between Fitzpatrick and Gunnar. If both those guys end up active and they get kind of creative with some different inactive players. But those are the first couple notable things from the roster. Other Steelers that are injured and guys to kind of monitor as we go. It's Saturday midday as I record. I don't think there's going to be another practice today, so we have the true updated injury report. They'll put out a projected injury report if we were have to practice on Saturday, then these guys would have practiced or not, but you never know how those are going to go. So some other injuries of note: Anthony McFarland did not practice Thursday or Friday. He had a few good kick returns, not really a factor in the offense, but that is something to monitor, especially if we're talking about, is Gunnar going to get the hat or not, right? If McFarland is out and Deontay Johnson's out, you can guarantee that Gunnar Olszewski will be active. But if both those guys are out, then Des Fitzpatrick would be as well, most likely. So Anthony McFarland did not practice Thursday or Friday. We will see how that kind of shakes out. Chukwuma Okorafor, starting right tackle, was limited both days, working through concussion protocol. So we will have to just monitor, how that goes. I don't know if they'll have another full practice. So that'll be interesting because they do an assessment after a practice. I don't know if that'll be today. But we'll just kind of monitor to see what happens there. I talked about in the preview episode, okay, what happens if Okorafor misses a game? Broderick Jones did get some practice reps at right tackle over the course of the week. I don't think that would be the plan. I'd be very surprised if that was the plan, to go up against this Cleveland Browns defense and defensive line that played so well, and Myles Garrett, and put a rookie who hasn't played in a regular season NFL game yet and put him out of position. I don't think he's ever played that in a game. I don't think he did that at Georgia at all. So I would expect Dan Moore Jr. to play right tackle and Broderick Jones to play the left tackle if Okorafor were to miss this game. James Daniels was also limited both days with an ankle, but it seems like he's going to be fine and ready to play. And Larry Ogunjobi was limited on Thursday and out on Friday with that same foot injury. Don't know if he specifically re-aggravated it during the game. I guess he must have. If Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi are both out on Monday night, it is going to be very tough for the Pittsburgh Steelers to do what they need to do against the run, but it's just going to give that defensive line, those young players, an opportunity to prove themselves. So I'm expecting Braden Fehoko to get elevated from the practice squad. Little surprised he didn't get that 53-man roster spot from Fitzpatrick, but I expect him to be elevated and help in that defensive line rotation. That if Ogunjobi and Hayward are both out, I would expect the starters to be DeMarvin Leal, Keanu Benton, and then probably Isaiah Loudermilk, who got the hat over Armon Watts going into week 1. And then you've got Fehoko. Oh, nope, forgot about Montravius Adams. So Montravius Adams in there with Loudermilk. And I'm thinking about this even more on the fly now, because the pro to keeping Adams and Benton over Fehoko on the 53 initially was their versatility. So in a base 3-4, could you see Ben and Adams both out there with Leal and Loudermilk and Watts rotating in as the ends and Fehoko rotating in as the nose? I think that's certainly a possibility. I like Adams and Benton's flexibility. I like both their ability to play as a rusher in the nickel and as a nose tackle or even an end in the 3-4. Benton would probably be a little better at that, but he's not as experienced. But I believe we've seen Adams do it last season. So we'll just have to see. I expect all those guys to play and be on the field a significant number of snaps if Ogunjobi is out, as well as Hayward. Moving over to Cleveland's injury report, it seems like they're going to be pretty healthy in this one. Safety Juan Thornhill did not play in week 1, and he has been limited both days in practice this week, Thursday and Friday. I think some Cleveland beat reporters have said they don't expect him to play in this one, but he didn't play in week 1, and it was still a pretty dominant defense. So, and they have pretty good a backup there as well. So I think they're going to be fine with that, and their corners are so good. It almost doesn't matter who your safeties are. So that's something to monitor. But the big one that's definitely out is obviously right tackle Jack Conklin, who's going to IR with a torn ACL. Rookie Dawan Jones is going to be starting in his place. Dawan Jones has made some waves in the media saying that he expects to see TJ Watt a lot, which, no kidding, that's the side of the field TJ Watt lines up on all the time. But he expects that he has found a weakness in TJ Watt. Jones has said that Watt leaves his chest open, and Jones has that great size and length, 36-inch arms. I believe he's like 6'7". He thinks he can attack that. Boy, oh boy, you better be right, Jones, because if you're throwing out a quick punch and exposing that long arm to TJ Watt too often, man, he's gonna swat that thing away and get the better of you in terms of leverage and balance. So it'll be an interesting matchup for sure. TJ Watt, coming off of 3 sacks against the 49ers, will look to create havoc once again in this one. The only other players for the Browns that played significant snaps in week 1 that could be out are the defensive linemen Shelby Harris and Maurice Hurst. Both played about 40% of the snaps in their week 1 matchup against the Bengals. They both went from a did not participate on Thursday to limited on Friday. Harris is dealing with what's being called an Achilles injury and Hurst a hamstring, but I expect both those guys to play. I think they're both rotational players anyways. So if they're at least got to limited snaps on Friday, they're probably just keeping them fresh to continue to do what they did in week 1. So let's get into the keys of the game. My 3 keys for the offense. You could probably guess, knowing from what I said again about the 49ers game, you got to run the ball. Najee Harris has to get the first two plays of the game, I think, to him, just run straight up the middle. I know how old that makes me sound and how much of a backwards football analyst and fan I sound right now saying that, but that's the way the Steelers have designed this. They're not going to be successful dropping back to pass, especially if Myles Garrett is getting to tee off against a rookie tackle and Dan Moore Jr. playing a side that he hasn't played in an NFL regular season game. Dan Moore has actually played pretty well against Myles Garrett for the last 2 seasons, but if you put him over there at the right side for the first time, he is going to struggle. When Dan Moore Jr. was a rookie, they tried him for like a week at training camp at right tackle to keep Chooks over there on the left side. And that went so poorly, they never went to it again. They swapped him and said, we're done with that. And Dan Moore hasn't played right tackle until training camp and preseason. He got a good bit of it. So this team has to run the ball. They need to utilize that strong interior of the line, running up the middle, get Jones and Moore, and hopefully Okorafor, if he's healthy, to just turn the ends to the outside, Obo Okonkwo on the other side for Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, wherever he's lining up, and run this thing straight up the gut. Attack those linebackers. That is the weaker spot of this Browns defense, at least from a talent standpoint. So just attack. This team has to run downhill. Otherwise, the rest of this offense is not going to get going, and we're going to see what we saw again against the 49ers last week. To go along with that, give me Darnell Washington blocking, man. We all saw that pancake on Nick Bosa. We saw Washington just kind of get up like he's done it before, and he played a good number of snaps in that game against the Niners. He has to get going. The Steelers have to create an advantage on the ground game because the Browns are going to try to do the same. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you can't let the Browns control not only the line of scrimmage from a game standpoint, yardage standpoint, but from a time of possession standpoint. If you're dropping back to pass too much and it's going the way it did against the Niners and even for the bulk of last season, and then the Browns can just run the ball and control time of possession the whole game, it's going to be curtains. So obviously these two keys, I do three. Two of them are both about getting the run game going. Without Deontay Johnson, we're talking about Des Fitzpatrick and Gunnar Olszewski, playing. George Pickens, Allen Robinson, Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, who practiced in full on Friday. Go 12 personnel, get Connor Hayward out there, let him be a lead blocker sometimes, and run this ball. You got to run this ball down in a straight line. And then you pop in Calvin Austin and make some explosive plays happen in nickel on third downs, things like that. But run the ball. I first need to see the first key is just the attempts. Make the attempts high. Get Jaylen Warren out there on some draws, on some shotgun handoffs, things like that. And then get Darnell Washington out on the field and block and create some holes. And specifically also to help Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones in the pass game. Get him chipping or let him even stay at the line. And then last key for the offense, Kenny Pickett just needs to stay calm. He's going to get a lot of rush. Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator for the Browns, is that stay sound, rely on the corners to do their job, and blitz the linebackers and edge rushers with the defensive linemen. He did that last week against the Bengals. There was a lot of rushes, a lot of blitzes. It's going to happen again. Kenny Pickett just needs to stay calm and stay in the pocket. Throw the ball away when you need to. Live to fight another down. Take a short sack if you need to. Don't try and you're not going to outrun Myles Garrett. You're not going to drift back into the pocket and get away from Myles Garrett too terribly often. So don't even try it. Make those quick decisions. Throw the ball away when you need to. Live to fight another down. Don't make mistakes. So Kenny Pickett just needs to stay calm in the pocket. All right, let's get to the keys of the defense now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, number one, as I alluded to, is going to be stopping the run. The Browns ran for 206 yards total in their week 1 game against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Steelers obviously gave up a ton of yards against the 49ers. It's the same as the offense. This team is built to stop the run first and then stop the pass second, with the league's leading intercepting team defensive backfield back there from last season. You have Minka back there for a reason. You have Patrick Peterson, who had 5 picks last year. Levi Wallace had a couple picks. You're hoping Joey Porter Jr. can get a couple. But it starts up front. You have to be able to stop the run to make any of that stuff happen for the DBs. Stopping the run is going to be key for the Steelers defense, especially with Cameron Hayward out. So what do you do to make that happen? Braden Fajoko, like I said, I expect him to be elevated. Don't know how much he is going to play, but I do expect it to be a good chunk of the time. The Browns, I didn't see from week one how much 11 versus 12 personnel they ran. They obviously have been a heavy 12 and 13 personnel team in the past, but at the same time, they have a lot of weapons and they want to be able to go to Deshaun Watson to pass the ball a good bit. So I expect to see a heavy dosage of both. Meaning I expect to see a heavy dosage of time where the Steelers defense is in base, maybe a little bit more than the average. So I'm expecting to see Fehoko over the nose a decent bit. But more than whoever's playing nose in those positions, it's going to be about the guys more on the outside of that line. So the defensive ends in base and the defensive tackles and defensive and the edge rushers in nickel. How much can they seal the edge? Because the Cleveland Browns offensive line is one of the best in the NFL, especially in the run game, much like Detroit did last Thursday against the Chiefs. They can do so many different things, so many different style run concepts. Wyatt Teller and Joel Petonio are two of the best guards in the league. Those guys can pull like nobody's business. They really can get out on the hoof and create a lot of mismatches with linebackers and these smaller edge rushers that they might encounter. So it's going to be, how do the Pittsburgh Steelers stop the run first and foremost? Do they throw some run blitzes out there with Landon Roberts, utilize his downfield ability? Do they go with some more 4-down lineman sets, something that we saw them do last year when they didn't have TJ Watt, so not as many weapons off the edge? But do we see it as a factor against the run? Do we see some Fehoko and maybe Benton on the inside with Adams and Watts or Loudermilk on the outside, and then you've got your two edge rushers over top of that as well? That will be something interesting to watch. I'll definitely be monitoring. So stopping the run is going to be key for the Steelers defense. Kind of a secondary version of that is keeping Deshaun Watson in the pocket. So similar to the offense, right? I said they need to run the ball. And then a factor I want to see them do that with is by putting Darnell Washington on the field, going in 12 personnel. Defensively, same thing. Got to be able to stop the run. And an additional factor to doing that is not letting Deshaun Watson get out and scramble. He had, I think, 45 rushing yards against the Bengals last week on 5 attempts, including a touchdown. 13 yards was his longest run of the day. You can't let that happen. You have to keep them in the pocket, where he has not been effective since coming back to the NFL and playing those 4 games for Cleveland last year, and then the 1 game against Bengals. I know there was bad weather in Ohio last week, but he was 16 of 29 for 154 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Took 3 sacks in that game against the Bengals defense. Even without Cam Hayward, you should be able to replicate that because of Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, Marcus Golson when he's out there, and then the DBs, as I mentioned, who didn't have the best game. But if Desmond King plays, then Minkah Fitzpatrick can play free safety. And if he can cover up enough stuff that the Browns receivers are trying to accomplish, you keep Deshaun Watson in the pocket, force him to operate within there. You let your pass rushers get to Watson. You're going to minimize his effectiveness, but also keeping him from being able to run around. We've seen that kill the Steelers over the last couple seasons, where the DBs are playing well, the pass rush is getting there, they're almost home, and then the quarterback just gets a lane to scramble through. So it's going to first be the containment abilities of the defensive line, who, again, without Cam Hayward, how are those guys going to play? Can Leal, can Loudermilk, can Watts, can Benton, who did play well last week, Adams, and Fehoko, can they hold their assignments, hold their gaps, and not create any running lanes for Deshaun Watson? And then can those linebackers be there to clean it up? Can Cole Holcomb, Quan Alexander, and Atlanta Roberts have better games, move side to side, react quickly, get to the ball, and stop Watson from running for first downs and for touchdowns? So keeping him in the pocket, making him throw the ball, allowing your defense to do their job is key number 2. And then key number 3 is pretty easy. No explosive plays. I mean, the 65-yard touchdown run by Christian McCaffrey in week 1 was pretty much the nail in the coffin for the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. Nick Chubb is a very explosive runner. You can't let him go off for a 50-yard touchdown run or something like that. You can't let Deshaun Watson scramble for multiple 20-yard runs because he didn't account for the quarterback. You can't let Elijah Moore get a big screen pass or get free downfield or anything like that. No explosive plays. You have to keep those to a minimum, especially if what we saw last week from the offense is minimal explosive plays. You can't get in a game where the Browns have 5 explosive plays and you have 1 as the Pittsburgh Steelers. You just can't do that. That's a recipe for disaster. You have to keep things in front of you. Things that the Browns want to turn to 20 yards has to be 10 yards to 5, 5 yards to 2. That is going to be the key for the Steelers to win this game. So overall, for the Pittsburgh Steelers coming out of game 1 into game 2, just get back to basics. Run the ball effectively, stop the run, and then let your defense make some plays when it needs to. That has been this week's episode of Bite Size Steelers, previewing game 2 Monday night against the Cleveland Browns. We will be back to you next week at some point to recap the game and look ahead to week 3. But everybody have a great day, have a great weekend, and enjoy Monday night.